Hi everybody, welcome to yet another video. So today we're having a little play with the Anest Iwata LPH50. Now this is a 0.4 tip, so it's the smallest tip that they actually make for this, or the LPH80 actually. I've done a video, it explains the differences between the two, but the tip and the needle etc. are the same on the LPH80 and the LPH50. So I'll put a link in the description, and if you want to watch that, then you can do it. It might explain a little bit more than I can do straight away here. But the basic difference between the two is the caps. Normally the LPH50 ships with an E2 cap and the LPH80 ships with an E4, but that's not necessarily just the case. I've never seen an LPH50 with an E4 cap, but I have seen an LPH80 with an E2 cap, if that makes sense. Basically the E2 uses a little bit less air, noticeable, only about 10-15%, but it's noticeable. But if you're someone that does scale models normally, I have quite a few people that watch the channel that message me via Instagram or Facebook or whatever, and they're into scale models, you know, 112 scale models, 124, all different scale models. And obviously I can't directly relate to that because I don't do scale models, but I do like my small, what I call micro spray guns. And people are always asking me, can I sort of demonstrate using these guns for normally clear coat, because that seems to cause most of the I was going to say problems, issues I suppose you would call it, for model makers. So what I thought I would do is I'd get out one of my practice tanks. I've got a couple of tanks that are the same, and we just muck about with them really and do various things. And I thought, well, I'd challenge myself and do the entire tank with a 0.4. So that's what we got. So you'll notice that the fan size, the maximum the fan size is slightly under 2 inches, about 48 millimeters, something like that. So it's a very, very small fan. But what it does prove is that if you go about something methodically, you can actually make most things do anything. What you need to be really careful of, if you're using something like this for a bigger item, and one of the reasons I wanted to do this as well is that some people that do, as I say, particularly scale models, most of the stuff is small, but occasionally they'll have something bigger to do, and they want, understandably, mainly for price reasons, a gun that will do all of it. So this just goes to show that it's perfectly capable of doing something that you would regard as reasonably big, as long as you've got the patience to do it. One of the things you will have to do is make sure, as I was just going to say, be very methodical about how you go about it, because you can't go back because of the amount of time. I mean, it depends on the speed of your hardener. Normally you might put a little bit of reducer in clear coat, but normally you won't. So it comes down to the speed of the reducer and the comes down to the speed of the hardener, and obviously the temperature you're working at. But if you miss something, by the time you've got to the other end of the, in this case it's a tank, but it could be like a car body, or you know, a scale car body or whatever, it's difficult to go back to it because the material has started to go off, so your window, so to speak, has closed, so you can't sort of touch it up. Sometimes you might see me, and you might see other people, they'll do a wing or a bike tank or a bonnet or something, and they might feel that they just wanted a little bit more on somewhere else where it just looks slightly dry, and they'll immediately go back to it and just put a little bit more on. Certainly I do that, and I know other people do that, rather than, you know, leave it, because you don't want to leave it dry, and you know that it will mix in with what already is applied really easy and flow out nicely and all mix in together. When you're doing something like this, because of the amount of time it takes to get from one side to the other, by the time bear in mind this atomizer is really fine, so the coat you're putting on is very, very fine. By the time you realise you've got a problem and you need to go back to it, it's too late. So just literally take your time, overlap about 50%, maybe 60%, and just slowly clear whatever you're doing, and that seems to work fine. I only did this as an experiment because I'd done it in a 1.0 for another reason, and then I thought I'd try it in 0.6, and I did upload the video, and then some people were saying I've only got a 0.4, do you think you could do it in 0.4? Some of that's to see if you can do it, and some of it's to see how you do it. So this is me doing it, and this is how I did it. It's just literally taking account of where you are on a panel. So you just keep the overlap just like you would do with any other panel, but you just got to keep in mind where you've been and where you haven't, and to an extent obviously you'll be able to see that. You know, you'll be able to see where you've been and where you haven't. Less so on the second pass if you're doing 2 passes of clear coat, but you know, this works perfectly well for me. But as I say, you haven't got a second snapshot you know, going for it. With this, I used it on full fluid and full fan. You wouldn't really want to put a fan in anymore unless it was something really, really small, in which case you may well use an airbrush. But this was just a way of me conveying to you how I would do something large with a fairly small fan and a gun that puts out very, very little material. This whole thing for 2 coats takes 120 millilitres of clear coat. So as you can see, it's not small. It's about 17 litres, which is what, nearly 3.5 gallons, nearly 4 US gallons. So it's a reasonable sized tank. So it is a reasonable sized area, but you can see how meticulous I am about just gentle overlapping, trying to keep the speed the same. And if you look at it at the end, I think you'll agree it actually came out really, really well. But I enjoy doing something like this because it's just it tests you a little bit. You know, I've got people that watch the channel will know I've got quite a few different, well, I've got a silly amount of spray guns really, and I've got something that would blast this in 10 seconds and give you a pretty good finish. But this is a little bit more trying, and as I say, because a few people have asked me to do it, I quite like the idea of a little bit of a challenge. But what it is good for is it's good for people that still want to do bigger things but have a really small compressor, because this uses, according to Iwata, and most manufacturers, when they give you a quoted air consumption, it's done in ideal conditions. So I always add a little bit on, probably about 10-15% to what they say, unless it happens to be a Chinese spray gun, in which case you could probably double it from what they say. But I always add a little bit on from what they say. So even if you added this to about 2 CFM, then I think you would probably be in the right ballpark. And a lot of compressors, even small compressors, because some people contact me and they say I've got a 25 litre compressor, and it's, you know, 4 CFM at 40 psi. Well, something like this, something like that would actually power this, because it uses, as I say, if you set about, I want to say 1.8, if you set about 2 CFM, but bear in mind that this actually runs at less than 1 bar. It actually runs at 13 psi, which is 0.9 of a bar. So it doesn't need a lot of air in volume or in pressure. So if you've got a small compressor, it would actually do it, as long as you don't mind taking time over it like I am here. I mean, you know, we're certainly taking our time over it, and I sometimes criticise guns for being slow and making the work laborious, but in a case like this, I know exactly what it's going to be like, and as I say, it's a bit of a challenge to see if you can get it to work well. But as long as you, and I'll say it again, as long as you avoid any dry spots, because you're not going to easily be able to go and, you know, sort them out later, only by, you know, resanding and trying again. You should end up with a really good finish, and I think you'll agree this is a very good finish. I was quite happy with these guns atomize supremely finely. Some people say to me, oh, I presume the E4 cap atomizes finer than the E2. I haven't found that at all. It flows a bit more air, so it tends to make the fan bigger, but not on the small tips. 0.6 and 0.4, it doesn't seem to make any difference to the size of the fan, so you're not losing anything by an E2. All you're doing is you're flowing a little bit less material, so it'll make the gun slightly slower, but you're obviously using less air. So yeah, I mean, I've done a video which I'll also try and remember to put a link in the description, just showing you the different fan sizes with, you know, from 0.4 up to 1.2, I think it is, with the LPH80, between the LPH80 and the LPH50, just so that you can see what you can expect from the different tip sizes. Anyway guys, thanks for watching as always, and yeah, thanks for everything. Cheers, bye bye.